As the NBA gets ready for free agency, moves are already being made by the Heat, including bringing back a fan favorite and perhaps cutting ties with a longtime Heat player. What happens next? We'll let you know in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. For daily content on the Heat, click that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you are following us on your favorite podcast app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins on FanDuel. Have a jam-packed show for you today. Davion MITCHELL is coming back. Duncan Robinson is a free agent, and he'd still have a couple of other big roster decisions to make before free agency begins on Monday. But first, let's start with the big news around the NBA regarding one LeBron James. LeBron could potentially impact the rest of the league with a key decision this summer. LeBron will opt into the final year of his contract next season and, quote, will closely monitor the Lakers' moves and whether the team is positioning itself this offseason to field a title contending roster. This, according to ESPN. I want to read Rich Paul's full statement that he gave to ESPN before we dive in here. Quote, LeBron wants to compete for a championship. He knows the Lakers are building for the future. He understands that, but he values a realistic chance of winning it all. We are very appreciative of the partnership that we've had for 8 years with Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka and consider the Lakers as a critical part of his career. We understand the difficulty in winning now while preparing for the future. We do want to evaluate what's best for LeBron at this stage in his life and career. He wants to make every season he has left count, and the Lakers understand that, are supportive, and want what's best for him, end quote. David, safe to say the door is officially open to LeBron moving teams this summer. What do you think?
Yeah, it certainly sounds that way. I don't think we've ever gotten such a clearly stated text or message from a representative before about their long-term future. So I guess with anything LeBron related, you're always going to get probably much more than necessary, but it just seems like, I mean, that point about evaluating the team and looking ahead to the future, most people are of the mindset that LeBron is probably close to retirement. And yet that sounds, not only does he look at the short-term future, but perhaps even one beyond this season. So, I mean, we're looking at potentially a couple of more seasons of LeBron's career as he continues to place himself in a position to win a championship, as the message stated. So I think, yeah, I don't know what to make of it. I don't know if that's putting pressure on new ownership or putting pressure on the front office to try and make some additional moves. But clearly the intent is for that team to improve. And if not, to understand, well, then I'm not going to be here for much longer.
I think you're right. The first layer of this probably is applying pressure to the Lakers to put a roster together that can help LeBron win now. Dorian Finney-Smith, I think it's very important here, did opt out this summer and is reportedly looking at moving teams. He wants to sign with a contender too, and there's several contenders that could be looking at Dorian Finney-Smith this offseason. That's another veteran piece, a two-way player who was really good for the Lakers after they acquired him from Brooklyn at the trade deadline last year. And if he leaves, I would understand why LeBron might look around and be like, okay, so it's 26-year-old Luka Doncic. We still don't have a center on the roster. You traded Anthony Davis for Luka last February. Austin Reeves and these pieces are nice,
right?
But I've been to the playoffs 2 years in a row now and haven't gotten very far after making the Western Conference Finals a couple of years ago. And he's only, like you said, probably he's got 1 or 2 years left. We'll see what happens here, but he wants to make every season count and he wants to go play for a title contender. And I always thought it was really interesting. The reporting around that Luka Doncic trade was that LeBron didn't know about it. And I don't really know how much of that was true or is true. And even at the time, I was pretty skeptical. But if it wasn't his idea, if he wasn't on board or all of this stuff, whatever it was, he could look around and be like, okay, so you traded for 26-year-old Luka Doncic. Where's my fit in all of this? And even when they made the Mark Williams trade, they moved on from a first-round pick that LeBron had been begging them, the kind of trade that they'd been begging them to do. But he's like, okay, but it was for young Mark Williams, who's not necessarily ready right now. All of the moves they've made even in hiring JJ Redick, a young coach, in using the draft pick on Dalton Connect last year and not moving him, all these things kind of set up for a team that's looked more at the future. And if I'm the Lakers, I'm okay with this. LeBron came to LA. He won us a title in 2020. Now he brought Anthony Davis here. We traded Anthony Davis for Luka Doncic. We have our international superstar who's 26 years old, who we're going to build around going forward. Why do we even need LeBron here? We've got Luka. And if LeBron is going to be putting pressure on us to try to win in the next 2 years in a timeline that doesn't make sense for us because we're building around Luka, then maybe it makes sense for the Lakers to move on from LeBron and say, hey, thanks for everything, and then trade LeBron potentially for pieces who fit with Luka long term. And I think everybody could walk away being like, that was a pretty good tenure. Like, everybody kind of accomplished what they needed to accomplish. So I think the next step for our purposes here is, should Miami be interested in LeBron James? They missed out on 37-year-old Kevin Durant. We talked last week about how they were going into a younger direction. You thought Kevin Durant was too old. LeBron James is even older, right? Obviously he's been here before. He's won championships here before. He loves Miami. He's talked about loving Miami. He spends a lot of time in Miami. His wife loves Miami. All these things. We know all of this. But should the Heat be interested in a reunion, David?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't see a downside to it. I think, one, from a business perspective, certainly adding LeBron James to your team is a good decision. So I think if you're looking at it from just a pure financial matter, yes, it benefits the Heat, it benefits the team, it benefits everything related to the business side of things. From an on-court perspective, yeah, you know what? It still helps. It still helps a great deal because he's still such a savvy playmaker. He's still a competent scorer. His defense is clearly not what it once was. And yet it was never really the most important factor in his game, was his defensive acumen. So the fact that he improved, or that he was able to play a high-level defense during his tenure, especially in Miami, I think matters, but I just don't think it matters as much anymore. And he's still a very competent and good player. Like, he's still an all-NBA player. If you could add that kind of quality player to a roster that clearly needs a superstar, yeah, you do it 100%. Now, I just don't know what it would take from Miami side of things. Like, what would they have to
before we get to that? I just want to, what literally was all NBA second team last year, 24 points per game, 8 rebounds, 8 assists. I mean, LeBron is still LeBron, right? He's not what he used to be, but he's still, to your point, one of the top players in the league. And here's the other thing. If Heat fans want to get, LeBron, he's 40, 41, like, we don't even want him back, whatever. You don't get to be picky anymore. If you want to be in the star thing, time after time you've struck out. If a star is available and you still want to be in the star game, you've got to chase all of them, regardless of whether or not you think the age or whatever it is that fits you. Now, Miami could just say, at the end of the day, we didn't go all in for Kevin Durant because we decided we didn't want to be in the aging star business. Okay, then don't go after LeBron. Either do it or don't. At this point, if you're the Heat. If I'm the Heat, I'm not offering anything more than I offered for Kevin Durant for LeBron. The deal is Wiggins, Rozier, maybe, and then maybe one young piece. That's the offer. And if the Lakers want it, and if LeBron's cool with a reunion in Miami, then good, right? Then maybe we have something. A key point in this is LeBron James has a no trade clause. So the Lakers can't just trade him anywhere. The Lakers are not also they're not compelled to trade him either. Like, if they don't see that any of the offers are any good, they could just be like, well, we're just going to hold on to LeBron James. Sorry, you have to be in LA for another year after he's opted into his contract. But I would say Miami has to be at least on the list of teams that LeBron James would. Well, when LeBron says, I want to compete for a title, the biggest question here maybe that we haven't even asked yet, and it's probably the most important one, is, does LeBron James think that him in Miami is a title team? Is LeBron plus Bam with Eric Spoelstra and Tyler Hero, is that a championship team? I don't know that it is.
Yeah, I don't either. But I know what former team can be in a position to win a championship. That's Cleveland.
Cleveland makes sense. New York makes sense. They were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. If LeBron wants to extend his brand to New York City, that makes a lot of sense. Golden State makes sense if he's interested in staying in California, a couple hours north by plane, and teaming up with Steph Curry. So those, to me, if I'm LeBron James, if I'm trying to think of the teams LeBron James would theoretically sign off on and waive his no trade clause, those are the 4 places: Cleveland, Golden State, New York, Miami. just in terms of cities and things like that. Unless I'm forgetting something. But those would be the 4 kind of starting points. And then after that, you have to answer the question of, okay, well, now if you trade for me, can we win a championship? I think you could talk yourself into the Knicks, the Warriors, Cleveland, but maybe not Miami. And maybe that at the end of the day, that's what it is. But if I'm the Heat, I'm calling. If I'm the Heat, I'm trying to figure it out.
For sure. Yeah, a reunion makes too much sense. I know people will balk at it a little bit because he's an aging player and everything else like that, but like you said, Miami cannot afford to be picky, and neither can their fans. If you add a superstar level like LeBron, it's going to help things considerably. But I also don't think it meets LeBron's criteria in terms of what he's looking for his next team.
Well said. Well, Duncan Robinson made a decision. He's opted out of his contract, and he's going to be a free agent this summer. That does not mean, however, that his time with the Heat is over. We'll tell you why after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Listen, you probably want to use FanDuel for a number of reasons, but you can track your favorite matchups. The app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use. There's a fast payout, and it makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. So if you're new to FanDuel, well, guess what? New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's just $5, and you get $150 back in bonus bets. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Duncan Robinson has declined his $20 million early termination option to become a free agent. He's going to work with the franchise on a new deal to return potentially, but that does not guarantee that he'll be back with Miami. So just a quick reminder, sort of catch up on this whole Duncan Robinson situation. About $9.8 million of his contract was guaranteed for next season of the $20 million contract. So he had an early termination option as that expired at 5 p.m. Sunday night. And then free agency starts Monday night, right? So if he didn't do anything, then Miami had until July 8th, essentially, to guarantee the rest of his contract. But instead of doing all of that, Duncan Robinson, I think a little bit in a surprising move, just declined his whole salary for next year. So even the $10 million that was guaranteed, no longer guaranteed. He just opted out of it. So Duncan Robinson, zero on the books for $0 next year. Duncan has no idea what he's making as of the time of us recording this at 2:45 Eastern on Sunday. So he is reportedly leaving open the possibility of a contract elsewhere or to come back to Miami. So we'll see what happens. So my question to you, David, should the Heat bring him back?
Absolutely. Again, I think there's just too much invested already in Duncan Robinson. And while you could argue that the contract was probably not, it did not meet the value that a lot of people within the organization believed it would, I think he was still a productive player and still one that contributed at a fairly high level. And it gave the team some much needed shooting and versatility in terms of their offense. And I still think that Duncan has a role to play for this group. I think it depends also on what other kind of players you might be able to acquire this offseason. But bringing back Duncan, to me, makes a lot of sense. And I think that would be his preference as well, is to be back in Miami on a team-friendlier deal that would allow him to continue his career with the only team he's really played for.
So a little bit more background on this. I'm trying to figure out why Duncan would have declined $10 million in guaranteed money, right? I mean, even if he thought that the Heat were going to waive him,
yeah,
you're still turning down 10. It's like, make them do it, right? You still got $10 million of guaranteed money coming your way, 9.8 to be specific. And I wonder if he feels like he could make up that money and get a longer term deal and secure his future all at the same time, as opposed to opting in, leaving open the possibility of getting waived, not knowing where he's going to play next year, and collecting $10 million, but not knowing if he's going to have, like, where, what his long-term future in the NBA is.
Right.
So there's something to be said about, well, I'll just decline all the guaranteed money with an understanding that I'll probably get a longer term deal. So if the Heat bring him back. Oh, and one other piece of background here. It seemed very likely that Miami was going to waive him because we'll get to the Davion Mitchell contract here in a second. But after bringing back Davion Mitchell this weekend, they were over the salary cap. And Pat Riley basically said they're going to try to get under, or not the salary cap, the luxury tax. And Pat Riley basically said, we're going to try to get under the luxury tax. So the only way to get under the luxury tax without making some sort of trade that would reduce payroll is just waive Duncan Robinson. It was the easiest way from point A to point B. If you just waive Duncan Robinson, you're under the luxury tax. So if Duncan thought that was going to happen anyway, then maybe it makes sense for him to have declined this option and renegotiate a deal. Now, Miami, they go from, after Duncan Robinson made this decision, they go from $8 million over the tax line to about $12 million under the tax line. So they could bring Duncan Robinson back theoretically at anything less than $12 million, bring Duncan Robinson back and still stay under the tax with 15 players under contract.
Yeah, what do you think a reasonable deal? Yeah,
that's where I kind of think this is going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So 3 for 30 in that ballpark?
I'm trying to think about deal. No, yeah. If he had exercised the option and he kept the money, like I wonder what the landscape for a player like Duncan would have been either. I think you need that kind of experience, and Duncan clearly a good locker room presence, brings an elite skill to the table, but also, you're getting some warts in his game, although I think he's improved vastly as a playmaker, and his defense is not as bad as people make it seem. And I think he's improved in that regard elsewhere, but he's not ever going to become a good defender. He's just going to be not as bad as he once was. So what's the market for a player like that with his specialized skill set? You'd have to have the right kind of team already built and be very close to contention where you can say, we just really need some incredible shooting on the roster. And if that's the case, sure. But generally those teams are already competitive and already probably have that kind of shooting ability on the roster, and so Duncan feels kind of superfluous. And I don't know if in lieu of getting a minimum veteran deal or something like that, then this opportunity to be able to extend his career and still be able to make a nice chunk of change makes a lot of sense for Duncan and his camp.
And those teams don't have a whole lot of money, right? To your point. And so if Duncan's looking at the landscape and says, okay, I can opt in, take my $10 million, and then I get waived, where are the realistic landing spots for me? And am I going to be forced to take something where I'm potentially making the taxpayer mid-level at like $6 million next year? So if he's got some sort of inclination from Miami that, and by the way, there's nothing illegal here. If Miami might have just been telling him, hey, if you decline this and we can work something out that makes sense for both of us, as opposed to having to make $6 million over the next couple of years from some team that he doesn't want, in a city that he doesn't want to be in, because he also loves being in Miami and talks about it all the time. Taking a little bit of a haircut now to secure $10 million guaranteed for the next 3 years or something.
Yep.
In that ballpark, that could make sense for everybody involved. Now, here's one other reason why maybe it doesn't make sense for Miami is we know that they want to maintain their flexibility for next summer. And Duncan Robinson was on an expiring contract. And had he just opted in and they didn't waive him, they could still just feel good about, okay, $20 million for Duncan Robinson. Maybe it's a little bit of an overpay, but we walk away after this season. We can figure it out next year. And we still have his bird rights. And by the way, they still have his bird rights now, despite the fact that he declined the option. But you could figure it out next year with a little bit more flexibility. They're not going. Duncan Robinson didn't decline this in order to sign a one-year deal, unless he did. I don't know. I mean, maybe he just comes back at $10 million and is like, look, it was either $10 million here or $10 million to be a free agent and potentially make some more money elsewhere, but I don't want to leave Miami. Like, who knows? But I would be very surprised if that were what happened here. So if they sign him to a contract that extends beyond this coming season, that's going to eat into the 2026 cap space, even more so after re-signing Davion Mitchell here. So does Miami even do this? And I, for the record, I have no clear indication, I think, of what's going to happen. I think Duncan Robinson is open to re-signing on a deal like that to Miami. Yeah. I think Miami is open to re-signing Duncan Robinson.
Yeah.
I don't think a deal is done. And I think Duncan Robinson is also open to exploring other options here. And so is Miami.
I think if any of the pursuits of superstars have shown the front office anything, it's that maybe those contracts aren't as easily movable as you might want to have thought. And so if you can restructure the deal, even if your intention is to keep them around in the short term, you could also shop them around. And it's a little bit more palatable. And again,
you could do a sign and trade situation for a team that, for a contract that makes a little bit more sense for another team. Yeah.
So there's options there, and I don't know. I don't know exactly how it's going to play out with Duncan, but
he'd be good next to Luka in LA.
Sign and trade for LeBron James, sitting Duncan Robinson over there.
1 for 1. Straight up. Why not? Yeah, Duncan Robinson and Wiggins. You probably have to maybe put Terry Rozier in the deal also to make sense of the salary, but I think all the options are open, but I do think that there's been initial conversations about coming back, but it might depend on some other things. And this LeBron James sort of bombshell on a Sunday might have changed some of the calculus here, but I at least like that we have a little bit more clarity on what's going on. So Duncan Robinson opts out of the early termination. He becomes a free agent right now. Door is still open to reunion or any other number of things here, but we'll leave it there for now. Meanwhile, Davion Mitchell is back with the Heat on a new deal. We'll talk about what it means for the rest of this offseason coming up next here on Locked On Heat. So we did get some news over the weekend. The Heat re-signed Davion Mitchell to a 2-year, $24 million contract over the weekend. Nice piece of business. I like that Miami got it done early. I also think it's a fair deal. It's fully guaranteed, no options, no team option, no player option. 2 years, $24 million, $12 million on it. Annual average each season. I like the contract, David. It's about what we expected. I think it's fair for both sides. I think Davion made a lot of money in his half season since coming over from the trade deadline. This was a guy that might have been out of the league if not for the strong run he had with the Heat towards the end of last year. I think it's a very fair deal for Miami for a guy who factors into their backcourt rotation.
Yeah, I agree. It feels a little, well, maybe a tad pricier than I would have liked, but I think it's worth the commitment to a player who stepped up and that I think you still believe in, that there's another level for him to continue to reach, or at the very least be much more consistent than when he's been over the earlier parts of his season. He was fantastic in Miami, and I guess the concern is that he might revert back to the player he was, or where he couldn't really crack the rotation either in Sacramento or Toronto. Not very consistent as a scorer, although you knew you were getting great effort for him defensively. But I think this is a great deal for Miami and for Davion. So I like it. Again, I'm glad that they took care of business early on, that they've made it very clear their intentions were to bring him back, and he didn't look elsewhere, even though there's a possibility that maybe there might have been more of a market out there than what we were privy to. Although that's another possibility, is that, you know what, it's just teams that might have some money available aren't willing to commit that much money to a player like Davion Mitchell. And that being the case, that it's a smart deal for him, even if it's just for 2 years.
No state income tax. I think he obviously wanted to be here. He talked very openly about it. He talked to us on this show about loving it in Miami. Yeah. Players are willing to shave a couple of $1 million off of potential money, knowing that, number one, we're getting this deal done now. I don't have to do free agency. Davion Mitchell's been traded 3 times now in his career. He's not the kind of player that has interest in free agency. He probably has more of interest of keeping both feet down for a second. And I think that qualifies for Davion Mitchell, certainly, in the security and being in a city that he likes, with a coaching staff that he likes, and with an opportunity where he can thrive. And I think that's the other part of to me, what's more important than annual value is the length. 2 years is not long. I mean, we were batting around 3 and 4 year constructions.
Yeah, different response.
2 years, he's right. He plays well for 2 seasons. He's right back on the market when the salary cap goes even higher, right? So I think it's a big bet on Davion Mitchell too, even though, again, I think he made himself a lot of money. I don't know that he gets half of this if he doesn't get half of this if he doesn't get traded to Miami at the deadline. So my next part of this, though, is Miami has 3 backcourt players now under contract: Davion Mitchell, Tyler Hero, and Kasparis Yakachonis. Is that good enough?
No, I think you need to bolster that significantly. I'm not sure what the right player is to fit the gap there, but I think you definitely have to look elsewhere at building something else. It's a nice versatility, is certainly something to look at there. I like the combination of different things that that group brings to the table, and yet it feels like there's something missing. And just for depth purposes, you want to be able to add something more than just the three.
Yeah, they definitely need depth, to your point. I'd like to have a real point guard in there. And frankly, a veteran who might be able to walk in and teach Kasparis how to play that position. Now, Chris Paul, it's been reported he wants to remain on the West Coast, and if he could do anything, he'd prefer to play in LA. And if that doesn't happen, Chris Paul could just retire. The guy's made enough money. So I don't see that as an option. We've been asked about Russell Westbrook. We're talking about learning the point guard position at a professional level. I love Russell Westbrook. I wouldn't qualify him as like the most point guard, right? But maybe somebody like a Tyus Jones or a Trey Jones or just like a Monty Morris. That might not be a big name that gets people excited, but somebody that's just been in the league for a while. Maybe you add him to the roster. But then again, Miami has 15 players under contract if they bring Duncan Robinson back. They currently have 14 players under contract. They might not be able to afford that guy. So that's sort of why I asked the question. It's, hey, if this is the roster, this is the roster. So if Duncan Robinson comes back, that's 15 players. That's another guy that you can add to the backcourt rotation. But in terms of a top three, we're looking at a world, and by Terry Rozier still on the roster. But if nothing changes, the guys who are probably getting most of the minutes, it's probably Davion, Tyler, and Kasparis. And I asked you if it's good enough. Probably good enough to win a bunch of games and potentially compete in the Eastern Conference. No, but it might be just what they have there.
Did they bring back Alec Burks?
If they bring back Duncan Robinson, no. Right? Whereas they don't have the roster spot. So
yeah,
it's Duncan. It's without Dunk right now. There's 14 players under contract. They could just stay there. They don't have to go to 15. And if they do stay there, they'll stay under the tax. They could still bring somebody back at a minimum if Duncan Robinson goes elsewhere. Maybe it's Alec Burks. I don't have the indicate. I don't know that that's the direction that they want to go. Maybe it is. I don't know. But yeah, like we're talking about minimum guys. But I also think that there's scuttle that Andrew Wiggins could get traded. Terry Rozier may be on the block. I don't know how motivated Miami is to really get off of Rozier if they're going to take on long-term money. I think they're fine just having Rozier's contract expire. Maybe he has a bounce back year. You never know. One other thing here before we get out, just in terms of business as free agency gets set to open here on Monday night. Nikola Jovic, contract extension eligible. No word on whether that's going to get done as of us recording this. I'm not sure that there is a deal that makes sense for either side, right? Miami, it doesn't really make sense to guarantee a bunch of money long-term, considering all the things that we've talked about with the flexibility that they're trying to keep, considering that Nico's just been injury-prone the last couple of years. I don't know that makes any sense. I also don't know that a contract extension makes sense for Nico, right? Because he might get lowballed here. And if you're Jovic, there's a ton of potential. Maybe you bet on yourself for 1 year. You go into restricted free agency next year and see what the offers are. That's probably where I think this thing goes. The only way I see an extension happening is if Jovic agrees to an extremely team-friendly deal. What about you?
Yeah, it's a gamble for sure. For the team, I think if they keep him and allow him to flourish as the way they expect him to, his contract might be beyond whatever they're willing to pay him. Maybe that's a chance they're willing to take, because we've seen that from the team in the past. It's like, okay, go ahead, prove it, and if you can get your money, go for it. For Nico, something similar, like where he has to go out there and really be able to show that he's consistent, that he has continued to develop within the Heat organization and structure. And so my guess is they get something done, and that Nico understands the limitations there, that as much as he'd like to place a bet on himself and his potential, the fear of more recurring and nagging injury, I think is too great. And I don't think the market around the league is high enough for him. Like, nobody's really waiting for him to leave Miami so that they can just pounce on the opportunity. At least not that I see it. I think we tend to see more of what Nico's capable of. We see the potential. We've seen it since draft night, etc. It's not to say that teams around the league aren't viewing him as a high potential guy, but not one that they're willing to break the bank for, at least not in my opinion.
Free agency starts 5 or 6 p.m. Monday night. We will pick things up after that with the latest updates on what it is that Miami's doing. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen today. For your second listen, find the Locked On NBA podcast where there is no offseason. Doug, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.